Broadcasting Corporation Television. This is another edition of your program, Good Morning, Leone, the program that always starts today. Today is the 18th of May, 2026, and I'm Sheku.
And my name is Francis Bernard. A pleasant morning here at Broadcasting House. Hello and welcome to your favorite breakfast show, Good Morning, Leone. As always, it starts today with analysis and views on issues of national concern. Well, our quote of the day is from American writer William Arthur Ward, and it says, "The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. The realist adjusts the sail." Sheku, is that so?
Well, the pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. The realist adjusts the sail. Well, for me, I chose to be a realist. You know, I call things by their actual names. And, well, I don't want to be a pessimist because one has to be optimistic if you want your life to be peaceful. So that is just what it is. But then I chose to be a realist. I am a realist through and through.
All right, thank you very much, Sheku. Well, in the program this morning, ACC clears the University of Sierra Leone administration of corruption allegations, and Sierra Leone to take in hundreds of West Africans deported by the United States of America. We invite you to participate by sending your comments, views, and concerns to the number on your screen. The number is 030-073-719, or you can also do so by going to our Facebook page, SIBC.SL. You can also find us on all other social media handles with the same address. This is Good Morning, Sierra Leone.
And the program you are still watching is Good Morning, Leone, live from Broadcasting House, New Englandville, in Florida. Well, as you may have heard in the news, the country's anti-graft agency, the ACC, the Anti-Corruption Commission, has cleared the administration of the University of Sierra Leone of corruption allegations following an investigation into administrative, financial, and procurement activities between 2021 and 2023. In its May 2026 report titled Investigation into Administrative, Financial, and Procurement Irregularities at the University of Sierra Leone 2021, and 2023, the ACC stated that no evidence of corruption or wrongdoing was found against officials who were the subjects of the probe. Those cleared include Professor Folisa, Professor Mohammed Samai, Mrs. Olive Cash Barry, Mrs. Wartina B. McKay, and Mrs. Betty Brima Boima. The Commission said its review covered allegations relating to administrative decisions, financial management, and procurement processes during the period under investigation. For more on this, we have here in the studios two gentlemen. First, we have the PRO from the ACC, Alex A. Barr. Good morning, Mr. Barr, and welcome to the program.
Yes, good morning, Sheku. Good morning, viewers. Thank you for having me.
Also here is a journalist and somebody who has institutional memory insofar as the University of Sierra Leone, to be specific, FBC is concerned, and he is our colleague, a journalist, and he is James Tambalevi. Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, my host.
Yeah, the man who has
I'm pleased to be here.
for sure. And he's here as a journalist and also somebody with institutional memory.
He's a lecturer.
A lecturer. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. So he knows. But then I start with you, Mr. Barr, from the ACC. Now, Fabi College, or those accused, feel exonerated. And I know that before you go into investigation or before you prosecute, you must assess the threshold. There is a threshold for you to move into action. Now, you've lost this case. I don't know if you agree to this, but then those accused have been exonerated, and the ACC has acknowledged that what they did not in any way amount to corruption or intention to commit corruption. But then, what does this mean for the ACC?
First off, thank you so much. Our intention when we commence investigation, it is not to win or lose. It is to review the evidences before us and to make a determination at the end of the investigations, what are the actions that we're going to take. We investigate, and depending on the outcome, it would inform us whether we're going to prosecute, whether we're going to invoke provisions in Section 89, the non-conviction recovery model, whether we're going to do systems review, as in this case, making recommendations for addressing certain systems deficiencies. So in this particular matter with the University of Sierra Leone, investigation arose from several issues that came to our attention. And those issues at the end of our investigation revealed lots of issues around procedural fairness, jurisdictional inconsistencies by, for example, a committee which was established to commence on investigations that involve certain senior officials within the University of Sierra Leone, but also on issues around unresolved or unreconciled, financial or audits, So, in fact, to preface this, there were lots of issues. The very first one that I'll talk about was that there was a committee that was constituted, and that committee was to investigate on several issues, on issues around research or grant management, on issues around the operations of the business center of the University of Sierra Leone, on issues around financial management. But we realized at the end of our investigation that the committee itself that was constituted and their work, first off, didn't even make any difference to a previously concluded probe, which were done by superseding institutions or statutory bodies on the issues that they investigated. And one of those was the Audit Service Sierra Leone. The Audit Service Sierra Leone had done their probe, into issues around financial management.
So, Alex, just a little clarification. Are you saying that even before you coming in to investigate this whole issue, the audit service Sierra Leone had already done theirs before you came in?
Yes, on the issue of financial management.
Yes.
Even before we came in to do this particular investigations, which we have concluded on, the audit service Sierra Leone had already done its probe, and they had cleared the university of any wrongdoing whatsoever or any financial irregularity. But even beyond the audit service Sierra Leone, the ACC ourselves, we had already previously investigated. Our investigation also showed that there were no wrongdoing. So when a committee of this sort was constituted, they made no deference to those conclusions of those previous investigations done by the ACC and the Audit Service Sierra Leone, and they did their investigations independent of those conclusions, which were only reconciled.
Alex,
that was just one issue.
Alex, you are talking about the ACC had an idea of the committee, the investigations that the University of Sierra Leone, the committee that they set up, and also they had another committee. Is that what you're saying? The university had a committee, or was it the Ministry of Higher Education that set up that committee that we are talking about?
No, another committee, an independent committee, was later set up to investigate several issues.
By who?
In fact, from the supervising ministry, in consonance with the university body. But what we're saying here, we looked at the process, whether the process followed clear-cut procedures, and one of those is what I have mentioned with regards to the fact that they made no difference, because when you're doing a probe by whatsoever committee, if there had been previous probe into the particular issue, let's say, in this case it's financial issue, you have to reference what were the recommendations, what were the conclusions on the same issue that you investigated, which was not done in this case.
Okay.
But secondly, the committee also, in fact, one of the principles of natural justice requires for all parties involved to be given enough time. We have the Latin maxim, which is ad alteram partem, for the other parties to be heard. But part of the spirit of, in fact, that maxim requires for adequate time to be given for the other parties to be heard. So our investigation found out that the individual senior officials within the university that were persons of interest were not given adequate time for them to be heard. But another issue also has to do with the operations of the business center, which the investigation committee, it was something of interest. But our investigation showed that there were, of course, no wrongdoings with the business center. There were issues on procurement of vehicles. And for example, like let's say 50,000 was agreed or was approved for procurement of vehicles, and they spent, for example, 30,000. So they underspent what was, in fact, set out to procure some vehicles, and which showed financial prudency as opposed to irregularity.
But it's not bad. The thing is that this has to do with highly placed personalities, not only academia, but in other spheres of life, so far as the socio-economic, educational development of this country is concerned. Now, before making their names public, to suggest that these people might have, involved in some kind of, financial impropriety or some kind of corruption, don't you think you should have done your homework very well? Because once their names are in the public domain, it becomes, integrity issue. So why not do that first before, naming them in public? But these people have been probed for alleged financial impropriety.
I think
embezzlement or corruption, as the case may be.
We have to understand this very well. We came in as a commission when the university and its superseding body had already constituted a committee that did their investigation and had all of those persons of interest. And in fact, at the end of their investigation, there were certain actions that were taken, which include removal of several of those persons. So we came in to investigate independently as to whether the conclusions reached, the procedures used, in fact, were consistent with the legal and regulatory framework in place. So we did not name any person or so, or accuse any person for any financial impropriety. But we came in to investigate, and our conclusion, in fact, now had shown that as opposed to the conclusion of the investigation committee, that is why I'm taking my time to highlight issue by issue.
Now, Mr. Bad, now that's because it has to do with, for example, persons like Professor Polisa, and other people. These are people who are highly regarded. They've been able to carve a niche for themselves in the field of academia. Now that they've been exonerated, is there any way, they could be kind of, pacified in a way, or kind of, yeah, for sure that these people were not in any way involved. So,
what are your
those who did
recommendations?
initial investigation, to like apologize to them for doing things that could affect their credibility in society.
So first of all, I thought I would be given enough time to explain the issue, so we all have.
No, what we have established is that these people have been exonerated. They have no question to answer. There is no corruption, they were involved in. That has been established. So now that has been established, that they've been exonerated, what happens next?
So we made several conclusions at the end of our investigations, but it is important that I should state that our intention and focus when we do these investigations, it is not on the persons or individuals involved. It is on the evidences before us. And clearly, of course, the evidences before us show that all of those persons that were involved, there was no wrongdoing whatsoever. Because even when it comes to financial management, which was very critical at the heart of all of the issues, was that people like the Director of Finance and other people that the investigation committee noted that they had wrongdoings, we realized that first off, the audit service don't clear them of any wrongdoings or any financial impropriety, and that there were issues around even the presentation of documents or so, which our investigation showed out that there was an improvement in terms of the financial system at the time of the investigations or so, which they were using the SAGE system now, and there were some capacity gaps when it comes to the staff in terms of understanding that system. But the audit service, when they did their investigations, all of the proper documentations were provided. So, in fact, those persons like the Director of Finance and other individuals, they had no.
Okay, now the news is, now we know that they are being investigated for alleged corruption. Yeah. Now, what is news is they've been exonerated. So what happens next? Because, like I told you earlier,
recommendations.
These are
These
are people of high repute, in our society. So they've been exonerated. What happens next?
So I think now you are taking me immediately to the recommendations.
Yeah,
now,
definitely.
at the end of the investigations, we of course pointed out some recommendations which we expect they should be adopted. And part of those recommendations, first off, we advised against the interference or governance disruptions in the operations of the university, because the university is an autonomous body, and the dissolvement, in fact, of the university court, my investigations clearly pointed out that was against, in fact, the existing University Act. It gave no such person the latitude to dissolve such courts. So we recommended that governance disruptions or into the university autonomy also should not, in fact, be seen going forward. And we also recommended that actions that were taken that affected those senior officials, those actions should be reviewed.
Okay, Alex, we have to hold you there to definitely come back to you to continue talking to the public about your recommendations in that particular investigations, where we still have with us in the studios James Tambalebi. He is a lecturer at Frabe College, University of Sierra Leone, but in this capacity, he's not talking here as a lecturer, but as a journalist, and who is also aware of what has been happening. Good morning, Mr. Lebi, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Frances. Good morning, viewer.
So, Mr. Levy, have you seen the report from the ACC?
Yes, I've seen the report. I've read the report, but I'm inclined to comment, like you said, in my individual capacity as a journalist, but also somebody with a wealth of institutional knowledge and to construct my authority on this. I've been with the university for almost 20 years. And before I was appointed as Director of Public Relations, I've served as Public Relations Officer, acting for three times. And since then, I've been with the university. But again, I'm here in my private capacity to provide context and background to this ACC report.
So take us
because it's
through that.
important to understand where we are coming from and to understand where we are right now. So I will divide my presentation in two phases, briefly, because of the exigency of time. So the first one is the antecedents. This is where Dr. Hajara Matulaiwuri, before she became Minister of Education, Higher Education, was a lecturer at Comas, University of Sierra Leone, heading the Department of Biochemistry. And at one point, she was acting Dean of the Faculty of Nursing, and a position she lost through elections. Professor Samai was the Deputy Vice Chancellor in line with the Universities Act. And Comas is known for administering grants, project grants. So this woman was recommended to be administer some of those grants. In the process, a lot of things happened. So number one, the first person she worked with lost her position and she took over. In my view, that was the first, if you like, red flag that was ignored. What happened, we don't know. But she took over the grant and the person was replaced by her. Along the way, there was a project that came to expiration and she wrote for a no-cost extension for 6 months. But then to implement that over 6 months, she asked for $15,000, which was the exact amount for the project overhead. And she outlined certain personalities who are to benefit from that money. Interestingly, the original investigator and the researcher for that project was not among those people. And so the money was not approved. Moving forward, there are other projects. She claimed $50,000 as an excess funding from WHO. She refused, she could not provide adequate documentation. And then the university said, well, if it is an excess money, we can return it to the funders, or let it be kept in the coffers of the university or the project funding. So on several occasions, she will ask for monies, project money, and she will be refused. Approval will be refused on the grounds of either suspicion of tampering with the document or no supporting documents, or in clear violation of the project.
So, Mr. Levy, let's make some clarification.
Again,
before she became minister, she was a lecturer.
She was a lecturer.
And she had worked with some of these people.
She was working with the grant. She was
okay.
All right.
Okay. Go ahead.
Comas. Yeah. So there was a particular point when she used, as a principal investigator of some of those grants, she used the University of Sierra Leone to get this grant. And when the project came, she transferred the project to a private farm. Yeah. She gave the impression, or that's the explanation she gave, and I have documents to the effect, that one, the university lacked the capacity to deliver those projects. And number two, she has resigned.
What's the name of the private farm?
IFD, Institute for Development. And there are records to show that she's working for that farm. So that's a conflict of interest.
Okay.
Yes. So she transferred the project. The funders and the partners were particular about the deliverables. And because she was the principal investigator, they allowed her to transfer the grants. And that caused some financial loss to the university because they were pre-financing that project. Do you understand? Now, she tendered her resignation before she became minister because that was the excuse she gave to the partners and the funders, that she's no longer with the university. She reduced her status as a full-time lecturer and opted for an associate lecturer status, which is not in conformity with many privileges. Now, when she became minister, and also as far as I know, she applied for promotion on a couple of times. And a couple of times she was denied that she did not reach the threshold. She's a biochemist, and she wanted to be an associate professor in public health. The deputy vice chancellor is not a member of that promotion committee. But there were rumors that the deputy vice chancellor is deliberately stifling her promotion. Those were the rumors. But when I investigated, I was able to unearth that where she wants to profess as a professor is not her field of study. To cut a long matter short, she was denied. So there were underlying grievances. When she eventually became a minister, she decided to abuse that office to victimize.
So, in other words, Mr. Lebi,
so let me explain. Okay, let me explain.
No, it is getting interesting.
Yes,
I want to explain this context to understand.
Go ahead, Mr. Lebi.
When she became a minister, she had already resigned before she became a minister. Then she writes to be reinstated as a full-time lecturer on a pro bono basis. The university asked her to reapply in line with the regulation. She wanted to be reinstated as a full-time. Now that's where the people in the registry, Mrs. Olive Barry and the others, got their own problems. Because they resisted, what happened? When Professor Fodisa eventually got an appointment to head the public health agency, as per law, there was no vacancy because the Act provided for they called him a pro-vice chancellor. And the pro-vice chancellor will occupy that position until such a time when they will have a substantive vice chancellor. That's what the law said. Now, Professor Samai, who had all along having this back and forth with this woman before she became a minister, is supposed to be the pro-vice chancellor. So she decided to abuse her office to stop Professor Samai not to be the pro-vice chancellor.
These allegations
so let me come. Of course, I am speaking from a position from an informed position.
Do you have evidence to
whosoever feel aggrieved can go to the IMC.
Go ahead, Mr.
I have the documents. Now, when the court resisted our appointment of somebody else to occupy that position, one, a retired professor, the former Deputy Vice Chancellor of Fubé College, now deceased, but also somebody who has served 2 terms and has been retired. When the court resisted that appointment from the minister, she moved ahead illegally to dissolve the university courts, which is a clear contravention of the Universities Act. And I was amazed, the ministry defecated on the law and the government turned a blind eye to it.
Okay, now, Mr. Lebi, let us come to this. Because of time, I know you have a lot to say.
A lot.
But yeah, a lot. But now, there is conflict of interest.
Let me come to the interesting. Let me come.
Now,
let me land. Now, when she became minister, she wrote to be reinstated and they refused. When she removed the people, those people that she removed on the allegation, bogus allegation of impropriety, which has now been cleared by the ACC, she got and picked people to fill their vacancies. And then those people now reinstated her as a lecturer, pro bono, as a visiting lecturer, contrary to the law. And this is the interesting point. They backdated that letter to a point where the former people were in office. You understand? And those former people,
as if it was done
by them. And those people clearly rejected her request and asked her to reapply.
But now that this has happened. Now,
let me come to the investigation, please. Let me land. This investigating committee, which has been rubbished by ACC, was headed by one Malam O. Malam O, one is in the TC.
And it's the former
Jane.
No, the former SG.
Yes.
One, he's serving in the Tertiary Education Committee as a commissioner on the recommendation of the minister. 2, he is a co-principal investigator for one of the projects administered by the minister, which was approved under the university, but then transferred to a private firm. So there is clear court conflict of interest. And this is the interesting point.
Yes.
When Malam O made this investigation, currently, 2 things. 1, the minister has been reinstated while a previous grant is being administered by a private firm. 2, she gained funding under the university, unknown to the university, but administered by that private firm. And Malam O is an employee of that private firm.
No, Mr.
Let me explain.
The issues are many.
There are many. In fact, I have document to the effect. Let me explain. I have document to the effect. When Malam O eventually submitted that report, her salary increased. I cannot tell whether it was in compensation of that dirty job he did or was a coincidence, but there was a difference, and he was even given a salary back payment.
Okay,
so
now
there is a clear cut conflict of
now
interest.
the point
and it was
now,
a vendetta to stop Professor Samai from becoming a vice chancellor.
Yes, I think you've been giving
vice chancellor.
I think you've been given the opportunity to hammer home your points. You know, and these points are very clear. But these are some of the things that happened. One, conflict of interest. Malice aforethought, you know, all of those. But now that it has come out this way, the ACC, which is the principal body mandated by law, you know, to investigate graft, you know, has actually exonerated these people. And you have such, because these allegations you are making are not, they are very huge. You know,
very huge.
These are allegations these are allegations that could, you know, amount to probably lead to ACC. In
fact, there are two issues being looked at by the ACC. This is one, and this is the report, their own reports, which the ACC has reviewed.
So now that ACC
there is another complaint in front of the ACC.
Okay, now that ACC has come to this conclusion that these people are not in any way guilty of any offense, any corruption, what would you suggest? They've made their own recommendations. One of them is that the University of Seattle should be an autonomous body. There should be no political interference and a lot of other things. But now that this has happened, and we are speaking about big men, people who have made their names, you know, in academia and in other spheres of life. Now that it has come out this way, what would you suggest?
So let me put it this way. Some serious damage has been caused by this blatant abuse of office and interference into the affairs of the university. So number one, which you said, very senior people, reputable people have had their names and images smeared, defamed. They have been subjected to harassment, to ridicule, to shame, to scorn, and that is very huge. Two, the university is in a climate of toxicity. There is divide, people are afraid to speak. The people who were suspected to be closely associated with those people who are removed from office or being investigated have been removed from office and replaced with some incompetent people, and there is this climate of divide and rancor, and people are afraid to speak.
So Mr. Leby,
there is serious ramifications for this interference.
One we say,
I will ask for a public apology in line with what a very prominent Sierra Leonean said, Vicky Rimo. There should be a public apology. That's one. Those people were smeared.
Is that one of the, because I was expecting 8.
No,
I'm not. It is not you. It is not you, Mr. Leby. I was expecting that as part of the recommendations by the Country's Anti-Graft Agency, the ACC, that there should be a recommendation specifically on apology.
There should be a public acknowledgement first that people's names were smeared. And these are family people, these are people who have worked for the university very hard. There are some who, throughout their careers, they've been working for this university.
Okay, Mr. Leby, quickly before we go for a short break, one will say, why is Mr. Leby only coming out now?
Me?
Yes, to say this, and is it because he's not being part of the status quo,
no,
the current status quo, or is it because he was also part of those people that were victimized?
Okay, for the records, I served under those people as the Director of Public Relations. When they were removed from office, I knew my job was on the line, and I was looking forward to it because there is no way I can work with the current administration. And in fact, I challenged them on several occasions, leading to the termination of my contract. I had a standalone contract with them. But here is the point. When the allegations were made, they were all over the place, making the noise, causing distress to those people, creating the impression that those people are corrupt. Now I have the moral high ground, now that the ACC report is out, to also make the same noise. These people can't speak for themselves. I have a media background, I'm a journalist. I can also make the same noise to say, hey, those people were haunted, they were harassed, and now the ACC is superior body.
So now you speak on the position of strength.
From a position, exactly.
Thank you
It's
very
a moral
much.
high ground.
Thank you very much. He is James Tambalebi, a journalist and also a lecturer at the University of Sierra Leone, Free College to be specific. But today he's here in the capacity of a journalist and not from the University of Sierra Leone. Well, quickly we take our health tips. In today's health tips, we take a look at 5 questions to ask your doctor about after breast cancer diagnosis. After being diagnosed with your breast cancer, you're probably feeling scared and more than a little bit overwhelmed. But don't be afraid to ask questions about your diagnosis and treatment options. Let's take a look at this video and learn from it.
You've just been diagnosed with breast cancer. Your head is spinning with questions and concerns, and you're feeling overwhelmed. You know it's important to ask your healthcare provider questions to help you better understand your diagnosis and treatment options, but it can be difficult to know where to start. Here are 5 key questions to ask. Number 1, what type of breast cancer do I have? Breast cancers aren't all the same. Up to 80% of breast cancers are known as infiltrating or invasive ductal carcinoma, IDC. This type of cancer starts in your milk ducts and then grows into the fatty tissue in your breast. Invasive lobular carcinoma, ILC, accounts for about 10% of breast cancers. ILC starts in your milk-producing glands and often spreads. Ductal carcinoma in situ, DCIS, is similar to ILC but doesn't spread beyond your milk ducts. Knowing which type of cancer you have can help you better understand your treatment plan. Number 2, how big is my tumor? Your doctor will perform a physical exam and use results from a mammogram, breast ultrasound, or an MRI to determine your tumor's estimated size. Your doctor uses the size of your tumor as one of many factors in your course of treatment. Smaller tumors typically mean your breast cancer is less advanced, while larger tumors tend to mean it's more advanced. Number 3, what stage is my cancer? Doctors use stages to help classify your cancer. Stages can vary from stage 0 to stage 4 and reflect the size of your tumor and the extent to which it has metastasized or spread. A higher stage means the tumor is large and has possibly spread. Stage 4 refers to cancer that has spread to other areas of your body, like your liver, lungs, or brain. Number 4 is the cancer in my lymph nodes. One of the most important predictors of the severity of breast cancer is whether it has spread to your lymph nodes. Your lymph nodes are bean-shaped organs located in your armpits and throughout your body. They are critical to how your immune system works. If your cancer has spread to your lymph nodes, you may need a more aggressive treatment plan, like chemotherapy or targeted therapy. Number 5, what kind of treatment will I need? There isn't a one-size-fits-all treatment when it comes to breast cancer. It depends on the specifics of your tumor and your overall health. You may need multiple kinds of treatment. This can include radiation therapy, chemotherapy, immunotherapy, endocrine therapy, targeted therapy, surgery such as a mastectomy, lumpectomy, or breast reconstruction. You'll likely have more questions as you work with your doctor and care team to decide which type of treatment is best for you. Don't be afraid to ask any and all questions as you travel down this path. Remember, knowledge is power.
Well, I guess you've learned a lot from that short video. We continue the program. Good morning, Sierra Leone, and now we go to another story that has to do with some West African migrants that will be coming into Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone has agreed to take in hundreds of West African migrants who are being deported by the United States. This is according to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. The first flight of so-called third country deportees will arrive in Sierra Leone on May 20th. Timothy Kaba said, transporting 25 nationals from Senegal, Ghana, Guinea, and Nigeria. Sierra Leone signed a third country national agreement with the U.S. to accept 300 ECOWAS citizens from the U.S. per year with a maximum of 25 a month. The U.S. has previously sent third country deportees to African states including Democratic Republic of Congo, Ghana, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, and Eswatini, drawing criticism from legal experts and rights groups over the legal basis for the transfers and the treatment of deportees sent to countries where they are not nationals. Well, for more on this, we have the presidential spokesman, Honorable Alhaji Alfakan. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the SMBC.
Good morning, Francis. Good morning, everybody.
Okay, so let's talk about this agreement reached by Sierra Leone and the United States of America to get West African migrants that are not Sierra Leoneans to come to Sierra Leone.
Well, Sierra Leone has been very selective in deciding which countries' nationals we're going to be receiving under this arrangement. It's very specific that they are going to be ECOWAS nationals, which comprises of 12 countries within West Africa. And it's an obligation, as we are part of the ECOWAS region, our people, wherever they may be coming from, have the rights to enter Sierra Leone and reside for up to 90 days. But if they are coming under duress, a situation of duress from the US, under deportation, there has to be some arrangement between government and the deporting country in order to look after the reception of these people and also to make sure that they are settled as humanely as possible for at least 90 days before they decide to change their status if they want to. But the opportunity also exists for them to continue on to their nationals, their own originating countries, when it is necessary.
All right, so Honorable, let's talk about what is involved in this. Has the Sierra Leone government received any money from the United States for them to accept these deportees in Sierra Leone?
No.
If so, what's the benefit for Sierra Leoneans?
Okay. No, the money that is being given to Sierra Leone under this program is mainly for the welfare and the resettlement of the deportees. It's only about $1.5 billion over a period of a year, and with 25 people coming a month. It is to take care of their transportation to their various places if they come here. If they're Guineans, they want to go to Guinea, they will be allowed to go. And the arrangement under the US Embassy, in fact, will be overseeing that money. So it is not money that's coming to government, either as a payment or consideration for receiving this. It is actually to help settle our nationals. They are nationals of ECOWAS, and it's our responsibility also to make sure that we look after them. We all see America. When any of their nationals is stuck somewhere, whether it is their fault or not, they go there with their strength to go and extricate them and bring them back to America. So we have an opportunity, we have an obligation to look after our own people, Sierra Leoneans, as well as those who live under the same regional mandate with us, that is ECOWAS.
All right, so Honorable, let's talk about, we saw a video that went viral of a Sierra Leonean national who was deported under this same project to Ghana, and we saw how that woman was manhandled in Ghana by Ghanaian citizens, even when she was saying that, oh, she is a Sierra Leonean citizen, and we saw that video. That's just one. And the other question is this part of efforts by government to for the United States to lift the traveling ban on Sierra Leoneans? Is this one of the effort that the government is making so that Sierra Leone will once again be allowed to the ban on the travel ban on Sierra Leone will be lifted? Is this part of the effort?
Well, let me first talk to you about the lady that was manhandled in Ghana. That is purely a Ghanaian issue. She is a Sierra Leonean. Had she been sent here, I'm sure that wouldn't have happened to her. Those who are coming from America now that belong to other countries within the ECOWAS region, I can assure you they will not be treated that way. We are of a different ilk in this country. We have a way of treating people, especially when they're coming in under a treaty like this one. Their humanitarian needs will be looked after, their welfare will be looked after, their accommodation will be looked after. But to go back now to your question about whether this is some kind of inducement to the Americans for visa ban, I can assure you that the discussions on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the ban to be lifted under some circumstances has been ongoing even before this came, and it is still ongoing. This definitely is not really directly involved with that.
But
this
somehow.
But somehow, maybe it might help. But I can tell you that this was not the consideration for us to receive this.
Now, Honorable, you spoke about the ECOWAS protocols on free movement of persons, goods, and services.
Yes,
That those protocols make provisions for a community citizen. In fact, if I'm an ECOWAS citizen, I go to Ghana, Guinea, Liberia, as the case may be, I'm not supposed to be referred to as a foreigner, rather a community citizen, which means you can stay in a particular state, a member state, for 90 days, after which you need to regularize your status. But in this case, we are accepting people whom probably we don't know what led to their deportation. Some of them might have been some criminals, and we are accepting them into our society. This one is quite different from those or implementation or adherence to those ECOWAS protocols on free movement of persons, goods, and services. They are coming, and they are going to stay here. And according to what you just said, a particular money, is going to be set aside for example, if they want to return to their countries of origin, they can go. But then, in this particular arrangement, what are some of the things that you took into consideration before accepting this?
First of all,
my colleague was asking if this is one of the efforts, for the lifting on travel ban to the United States.
Like I said, it is not specific. It is not directly supposed to be linked to that directly. But as you know, in diplomacy, there are quid pro quos which may come after. I told you that the effort and process of trying to get that ban lifted has been ongoing for this issue of the deportees and will continue. The question of the ban was based on people who lived Sierra Leone, according to the U.S. Embassy, according to the U.S. State Department, who overstayed the U.S. And the fact that during past years, there has been some reticence by government to accept its own nationals who are being deported like that. So that ban is based physically not on ordinary Sierra Leoneans. It is for government officials or specific MDAs in this country who face that ban. So,
these people who have come here, they have their countries. But then this is an arrangement some other countries actually rejected. Some countries did not accept.
It is also an arrangement some other countries accepted.
Yes, and some other countries did not. Now the question is, why Sierra Leone decided to accept?
Well, Sierra Leone is Sierra Leone. The people that are coming here are ECOWAS citizens. ECOWAS citizens, as long as they are not criminals, have a right to come here.
But how do you ascertain that?
Yes,
when in fact some of them, from the United States, some of them are currently under detention. They are being incarcerated, and
yes.
Were you able to kind of ask questions as to?
Of course, because our government.
Because if somebody is a criminal and that person is allowed to integrate into our society, there is a possibility of antisocial activities by some individuals, some of these deportees, because their statuses are unknown to many of us as citizens. Probably government knows, what some of them are being deported for, but for the citizenry, it is not to our know. But then, how do we live comfortably with these sets of people who are deportees from the United States?
Well, if you are giving me an opportunity, I will answer your question.
Yeah, definitely. That is why. Just go ahead.
Could you give me an opportunity now, please?
The opportunity is
the question of criminality is one that was discussed lengthily by the negotiating team that in fact we're not accepting anybody who is supposed to have been a criminal. Those who have been taken because they don't have correct papers for living in the US and all that are the ones that we are taking. And our government has, I'm sure, had a team that were discussing with the State Department through the embassy here to ensure that, and I'm sure that the American government will not deceive us. And tell us that people coming here will not be criminals, and then they send us criminals. No, our situation is very clear. It is an agreement that we can opt out of any time if we find out that what is described as people of not criminals who come here turn out to be criminals.
But is there a need for a ratification of this particular activity, this agreement?
I just told you that there's an opportunity to withdraw at any time.
All right.
Okay, now that they are coming here, which has been approved, where are they going to stay? Are you going to kind of lodge them in hotels, in guest houses, or there's going to be a camp where they'll be housed?
Well, I'm sure the very first day they come, like the 20th, as they say, there's going to be logistical arrangements where they will all be kept in one place, from where they will be processed to see who is fit to go back into society, or those who are not so fit to go back into society to stay in controlled areas. That's an uncoming place. And those who want to go back to their countries, through this funding that is being provided by the American government, will be repatriated to their own country. This is just a point of first stop point from America. As you can see, most times we are one of the closest across the Atlantic from the US. And we have a liberal arrangement with our own ECOWAS community citizens. So they can come in here and then decide to go back to Guinea or Senegal.
But after 90 days, Honorable, after 90 days, because according to the ECOWAS protocols on free movement of persons, goods and services, it is 90 days.
Yes.
So after 90 days, what if they decide not to go?
They regularize their
papers.
They have the right to request for regulation.
But if all of them decide
not
that we are not going anywhere, we are going to stay in Sierra Leone.
There are protocols, there are laws, there are regulations, there are refugee laws that will help them, under which they can apply for asylum.
All right, thank you very much. He is Honorable Haji Alpha Khan, and he is the spokesperson, presidential spokesman. This is Good Morning Sierra Leone. We still have Alex Eba from the Anti-Corruption Commission. Alex, so let's talk about one of the major recommendations, suggestion that my colleague was just making. Why is it that it's not in your recommendations that there should be a public apology, or that these people should be reinstated now that they have been cleared from any wrongdoing? Why is it not in your recommendation?
Yes, so our investigations and the recommendations that we make in situations like this, they are contingent on the existing framework we have. For example, the Anti-Corruption Act. So there is nowhere in the Act that would require, at the completion of such investigation, requiring for apology. Like I stated inter alia, that at the end of our investigations, the outcome would determine whether we're going to institute any criminal proceedings, that is to say we're charging to court, whether we're going to invoke non-conviction, that is for instance of misappropriation, and here there was no wrongdoing of misappropriation whatsoever, whether we're going, so those basically inform, and in this case it is also the other prong that we usually adopt depending on outcome in investigations for systems review. Well, in this case specifically, we investigated the report which was done by an investigation committee, and those are all of the things we outline. What we found out, issues around procedural fairness, people were not given opportunity to hide. I have already stated that
in itself is not good.
I have already, and that is why our investigation has made that very, very clear, abundantly clear. Issues around jurisdictional inconsistencies, which we also found out, and the fact that they made no such deference to other investigations.
But have you done like you are doing in other MDAs? Have you done systems and processes? I mean, that is what you do in MDAs, because what has happened is like this has to do with people's credibility, integrity, respect, dignity in society. So, have you attempted at doing any, systems and processes review in the University of Sierra Leone?
So this particular issue, it does not concern or does not surround any such systems and process review.
Like I stated, probably if you had done that,
I am coming to that.
If you had done that, probably this kind of thing.
Is that in your recommendation?
This kind of thing should not have happened if you had done that.
Like I stated, in fact, the investigations, what we found out, I reference systems and process review because it is actually related, but not the classical systems review we actually do. So where it is related, one, we have recommended that they have clear, defined frameworks which should regulate how grants are handled. So part of these issues is also how grants are handled. Universities across the world, they embark on research. In fact, advanced universities, like where I also studied, Makerere University in Uganda, some of these grants that they even write and win, there are times even governments would borrow money from them, and which the universities have been doing here. But on the issue of the use or utilization of the overhead, which Commerce did by even constructing their 800 capacity amphitheater, but also even with the University of Sierra Leone, Frabi College specifically, there were issues that we found out that one, when it comes to the utilization of those overhead, resources, which is already most times given to the university for restructuring or improvement in their infrastructure, there are no policies on how these monies are handled.
All right,
and that is why we also realized that, like he did state, which we also mentioned in our report, that one of the grants was transferred from the university to a private fund.
Okay,
so we have
Alex,
recommended that they should have clearly defined framework to regulate on how these things are actually to be.
All right, Alex, quickly, are you interested in some of the revelations made by Mr. Levy as the ACC? Quickly, in few words, are you interested, or are you already investigating some of these statements?
So Mr. Levy is a very senior journalist and lecturer, and he knows that as a citizen, he has the obligation to provide support to the owners to the ACC. But this investigation is actually an outcome on the committee that was set up. But we have other matters actually that is subsisting, which I cannot comment on.
All right, thank you very much, Alex. Mr. Levy, quickly.
So let me emphatically state that from the records I have at my disposal, this is a clear court abuse of office underpinned by personal vendetta to go after certain people who were not doing the minister's bidding at the time when she was a lecturer at Commerce before becoming minister, even after becoming minister. So she violated the code, the law, the Universities Act, went after some people, pursued them, and now they've been vindicated. So while it is not legal, according to the ACC, for them to tender apology, it is a moral imperative that they should publicly apologize to those people. One. Two, according to the recommendations, they say they should review those positions. People were removed from office who were competent and appropriately appointed and replaced with yes men and yes women who are now doing the bidding of the minister. Those people, in law, there's what they call it's void ab initio from the word go. The fact that they've been cleared means those people now occupying those positions have no business to be there.
Okay.
Above all, those people deserve compensation, heavy compensation.
All right.
Thank you so much
for the mental anguish.
All right. Okay. It has done some psychological damage.
Absolutely.
That is what Mr. Levy says. But then now we still have the presidential spokesman here in the studio, Haji Dr. Alpha Kanu. Now these our community citizens are coming. I will not refer to them as foreigners because the ECOWAS protocols on free movement of persons actually do not allow that. But then now that they are coming, what are the preparations for their welcoming?
Well, I think first of all, the U.S. Embassy and government have decided to outsource the processing of these people when they arrive to a private company that will be based at Leone on their arrival, and they'll be able to encamp them initially when they arrive. And please note that it is only 25 people who are coming every month over a period of 1 year, for about 300 total. So these people can not overwhelm us, our security systems, our social systems, in order to be able to ascertain their standards and their integrity and things like that before we understand that a lot of them would want to go back to the countries of origin. A lot of them are from Guinea, Ghana, Senegal, and Gambia. And then the first ones that come, they're just next door here. These are people who live with us in and out all the time.
But I'm quickly, Doctor, why is it that they were not sent to their countries of origin? Why Sierra Leone? Why not their countries of origin?
They are coming by charter. If you're going to deport 25 people, and these 25 people will all come from 25 different or 12 distant countries, let's say 2 per country, you're not going to charter one more plane to take each one of them to their country. You only 12 aeroplanes. So for convenience and for economics, they say, okay, let us look for a country that will be able to receive them, as others have done. Ghana did that. Eswatini did that. Cameroon did that. So we go in there, these 25 people can conveniently take an airplane that will take them there. And once they're there, they will now be distributed through a local logistical arrangement to take them. So there are so many considerations, social, humanitarian aspects.
So, Honorable, how about security? Have you put in place enough security? You know, in as much as these are ECOWAS citizens and they are brothers and sisters, we also be mindful of what is happening lately in this region. So, have we put enough security in place to make sure that you are saying that they are just 300, yes, they will not be able to do anything to us, but a single act will cause a lot of problem. Security.
Well, that is why I am happy that they're limited to 25 in number. Even the police we have at Leone and the local division, we are able to oversee the monitoring of those people. There is only 25 people. Yes, we have enough, and to make sure that we can contain them.
All right.
And for what is happening in the sub-region.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. He is Alhaji Alpha Kano, the presidential spokesman, and that is how we say goodbye. It has been Good Morning Sierra Leone, which came to you live from the Sierra Leone Broadcasting Corporation Television. Many thanks to the entire production team, especially producer Daphne Zainab Kamara. I am Sheku Sumaya.
My name is Francis Bernard. Many thanks to our guests, Mr. Levy, Mr. Ba, and also Honorable Alpha Khan. Have a lovely and wonderful day. Good morning.
Across Saloni, more people are asking the same question. Why buy fuel anywhere else when Cornex gives you more? Professionally trained attendants who know service matters. Honest fuel. A litre is a litre, every single time. And when it's time to pay, easy. Pay with mobile money, Visa or MasterCard, or the Cornex fuel card. Clean restrooms, welcoming spaces. Every station, every time. Clean fuel, clean spaces, clear value. That's why Sierra Leone fuels with Cornex. Cornex retail outlets. Always clean, always professional, always for you. Fuel smart, live smart. Get your Cornex fuel card today.
As a mother of the house, whenever I want to prepare palm soup, there's no need palm